Hello everyone and welcome back to Fairydust. So for this project, as you could already tell from the title, I'm going to make my all-time favorite fairy from Winx Club, Musa, in her Enchantix form. These are continuous series on my channel, so if you wouldn't want to miss on Flora, Tecna and Bloom in the future, then please don't forget to subscribe to this channel, like this video if you like it of course, and comment. I absolutely love reading all your comments. With that all being said, let's get started. So as a base for Musa, I chose this CA Cupid doll from Monster High. Basically, Cupid is supposed to be the adopted daughter of Eros, Greek god of love, and she's the only character that did a transition between Monster High and Ever After High. But I believe the Monster High version of Cupid is using the Gulia mold. Now of course I could use the previous Chem Vampire mold for Musa as well, however I wanted for all the POC characters to have their slightly distinct face molds to match their facial features, and also the skin tone of this doll was just perfect for Musa in my opinion. But anyways, enough rambling, I began the usual preparation process by warming up her head with a hairdryer, then I disconnected it from her neck. Also, the previous owner was kind enough to cut her bangs for me, so thank you for making my work easier, honestly. After cutting her hair, I removed her hair plugs with tweezers. And then I removed her factory paint with pure acetone. Then it was time to dye her hair. I will be using this dark blue hair dye from this Italian brand called 360. And notice how the hair dye brand is also Italian, just like Winx Club is. I mean, you know that's how meticulous and specific I was about this.
Il natrio è l'essa transparent la stata variante Brasilia.
But obviously, I'm just kidding, I used this brand multiple times in the past and I'm not sponsored by them or anything, by the way.
Peppa Pig.
But anyways, I used my scale to add equal amounts of dye and oxy, and then I mixed this substance together. And then I placed this white alpaca hair and dyed it blue. And notice how I'm not using any gloves. Please don't be like me and use some gloves, cause these are chemicals we are working with at the end of the day and safety is important. And this is what I've ended up with, and it was finally time to wash these babes. And after I washed them, they became super thin. Now I forgot to show you how the hair ended up looking after I ironed and rinsed them, and honestly it was fine, but I really wanted another layer of blue, so I also dyed them in boiling water using some blue red dye. Also in this reference photo she has some purple streaks / stripes in her hair.
Got some blue going on.
Where's that inspiration coming from?
I don't know, I like a little edge and a little pop in my hair.
And of course I couldn't ignore them, so I dyed this as well using purple red dye this time, and this is how it looked. And once I was done with hair dyeing, I painted her head scalp blue and my battery died there, so I rerooted her head, and as always I started from the bottom row and then I slowly reached to the top row. And once I was done with that, off camera I rerooted her bangs and then I used the purple hair dye to do stripes. And off camera I added the fabric glue to secure the hair plugs in place. Then I protected her hair with some fabric, did 3 layers of Mr. Super Clear, and I began the repainting. Obviously she couldn't be paper-wise, so I blushed her face with pan pastels and then I drew her eye shape. And then I blushed her eyebrows. Added some pink pigment to her lips, and then I drew her irises. Then I drew her upper and lower eyelids, and then I added some blue pigment to them. Off camera I darkened the iris edges and then I blushed to draw her pupils. And then I took my time to really nicely blend these colors together with pencils. Off camera I also blushed her upper and lower eyelids to give them some depth. I drew the spots of her black and purple eyeliners on top of it. Then I began showing her eyebrows. I'm using this tiny brush for that so that they will look very delicate and realistic. And then I also gave her some blue eyeshadow. In this stage I painted her scleras with white acrylic paint. And then I sealed this layer with Mr. Super Clear, and then I did another layer on top of it, and then I sealed it again. And then I painted her eyeliner with purple acrylics. And then I painted this white line at the edges of it to make it more sleek looking. I also painted the texture of her lips and I blushed them a bit more, so that they will look more realistic and rosy. And this is how it looked, and off camera I painted the majority of her eyelashes, so I only recorded some of its process. In here I also really nicely darkened her right iris, and I also darkened the left one. Then with a white pencil I did the highlights, and off camera I did the catch lights using acrylic paint. Then I finished her eyebrows by doing some whitish hairs, as I guess as highlights in between them, sort of. Then in the end, to permanently protect my work, I added the Pearl-X powders and I sealed this layer with 4 layers of Mr. Super Clear. Then I removed all her hair protection and it was finally time to fix her messy hair and cut her bangs. I sprayed her hair with some water and then I ironed it with my hair iron. This is how her bangs looked at first, so I fixed this mess as well. Also, I wanted to keep these 2 sections of her bangs. I believe these are called side bangs. And then I did the first big cut with my fabric scissors. Then I did the rest with my thread clippers or shears. Now, I don't even know how to say this. I feel like some of you are absolutely going to kill me for this, but basically I put this doll head in a box and I began working on her outfit during this time, and my brain went into a spiral again. At first I was very happy with her face up and the thoughts of regret were quiet at that point, and while I was working on her outfit they started to get louder and louder. In my head I was like, no, the face up is great. Please don't touch it. Please, we don't have time for this. You literally spent 5 days in a row painting day and night. Please don't do this to yourself. But then I took it out of the box and at that point I fully disliked this face up. I was thinking that if I use screenshots of Musa from the cartoon as reference photos, my repaint will look Asian, but I feel like things got lost in transition. To be completely honest, I don't think that I was able to properly capture Musa's facial features because I was using the wrong reference photos. Musa is supposed to be East Asian, specifically Chinese coded, and she is loosely based on Lucy Liu. And my repaint, even though the shape of the eyes was very Winx, however, it looked like a white girl cosplaying as an Asian girl, and it just made me feel very weird, and I've got these very bad thoughts about it, and I low-key started losing my mind at this point. And I really just couldn't afford repainting her face again, but now I'm seriously about to start crying because 5 days were gone for no reason.
Anyway.
So this has to be one of the most heartbreaking moments throughout this channel. And the thing is, with Stella, both of her previous faces, I didn't like them, so erasing them was so much easier. But this face, I loved it so much, but I just couldn't go with it because that would be wrong. So I erased her face and jumped straight to Pinterest. I have been looking at portraits of East Asian girls / models, trying to find the one that feels the most Musa to me, so that I can use her portrait as a reference photo for her. I found this beautiful South Korean model called Yoon Bae, and Yoon's features were not the only ones that I referenced. I also used portraits of my favorite Chinese singer Lexi Lu. She has such Musa energy, it's insane, and her music is what I imagined the real-life Musa would be making. And overall, I used portraits of different Chinese and Japanese models. And basically this is how my mood board looked like. And Musa is never confirmed to be 100% Chinese. I mean, the Planet of Melody is supposed to be a blend of different East Asian cultures. So my goal with this new face is Let me explain this with an example of a popular character. See Mulan here, for example. In her 2D version, she's very realistic, a bit stylized of course to match with the Disney princess proportions, but still realistic enough to match more human proportions. However, when they transition her to the Wreck-It Ralph universe, the 3D model is more stylized in here with completely different proportions, so that it will match with this specific universes/cartoons art style. So she's heavily stylized in here because, like, imagine if they used the 2D proportions for this, it would be completely out of place. So that's exactly what I did here with Musa. At first I painted her eyes more realistic Asiatic looking, and then I slowly with layers enlarging the size of them so that it will match with the Monster High proportions while keeping its OG shape. Because again, Monster High proportions, they are very stylized and very surrealistic looking in a way, and 100% realism wouldn't work in here, especially with Winx Club in mind. Listen, they indeed have to have their distinctive unique facial features, but at the same time they have to look harmonious together, because these are a team of fictional characters at the end of the day. But I feel like even though I tried to make my repaint look stylized, it still ended up looking quite realistic. Because I mean, I wanted her face up to be like 70% realistic and 30% stylized, and not vice versa, sort of like it was before. To back up what I've just said so that I won't get any dumb comments, I graduated master's degree in graphic design and I was specialized in character design, so I know what I'm talking about. I literally have formal education in this. It's just, I didn't want to tell you about this entire time because I don't want to sound arrogant and I felt kind of shy. So I really hope that it just didn't, what I've just said, it just didn't come out in an arrogant way, you know. But anyhow, also the eye color, the previous face up I didn't quite make the eyes as dark as they should be. I mean, overall it was still light blue and there are already 3 members of fairies with light blue eye colors. So if Musa's was also light blue it would be a bit too much, I think. So in here I made sure to paint them dark blue, but actually I found some really old Musa Enchantix artworks and her eyes were painted dark purple instead, so I decided to add more purple tone rather than blue, so that she will stand out even more compared to Layla, Tekna and Bloom. Also this time I decided to give her more fiery red eyeliner. I thought that it will make her look more fierce and will enhance her hot-headed temperament. I also wanted her to have a specific facial expression this time that will match with Musa's emotional state and personality. I kind of wanted her not angry but more of a resentful and defensive facial expression. It's like you have this sort of bitterness and resentfulness towards the world that you live in. Like, you know when someone before getting upset they get enraged and you can tell that they're about to start crying? Like, that's the exact expression I wanted prior to crying basically. In this stage I also painted the scleras with white acrylic paint, and it looks super weird in here, but just wait until I blush it to push it to the background. So this is how it looked without blushing and eyelashes, and this is how it looked after. I also painted the highlights of her eyelids, and I did small wrinkles under her tear ducts, and then off camera I added the catch lights of her eyes. In the end I added the Pearl-X powders and then the face up was finally done. And oh my god you guys, I was so pleased with this. Like, that's Musa right there. The expression matched so well with her personality, just gave her so much character, whereas the previous variation that I did was just a cute face. But I still had to fix her hair and fix her bangs, so we will go back to this at the end of this video. But anyways, I quickly sanded her body with sanding buffers and then I blushed it with chalk pastels. Again, it's still pale, but at least it looks more realistic now instead of just paper. Then I began working on her fairy outfit. As always, I wrapped her body in a kitchen wrap and then I taped it with paper tape and then I drew the shape of Musa's crop top. So I cut it out and here are all the pattern pieces in paper tape and here are all the finished patterns traced on paper. And here are all these pieces cut out of fabric. I used 2 layers of this scarlet red silk satin fabric with a scarlet red tulle layer on top of it. And I used paper glue to temporarily keep these pieces together, and then I cut out the access tool. Then I hemmed the edges and I also stitched the triangle parts of it. These are called drafts, right? To create the shape of her chest basically. Now this slice in Musa's crop top, in some reference photos it's yellow and in some other reference photos it's pink. So I noticed that the yellow one is the most repeated, so I decided to do yellow. So I cut out these pattern pieces and then I stitched them together. By the way, during this time I've got sick again, and oh my god you guys, listen. I've got COVID in 2021 and I took it so easily, I don't know what the actual hell this was. I felt like I'm about to die, like my entire body was burning so badly. And I felt terribly dizzy, but I still kept working. In here I also noticed how my stitches began going uneven and crooked, and that's how you can tell that I was in a dark place.
So you can act gangster and talk all the you want, you're irrelevant, no one with you, and all your friends talk behind your back, so reevaluate your entire existence.
So I just left the crop top like this and I took a break for a day to go to rest. And then the next day when I came back, and oh my god, I didn't like this crop top. Like, what in the fast food chain is this color combo? It looked like a ketchup and a mustard. Bella should be proud. Like, it literally looked like the old school McDonald's logo. Basically, I didn't like this, so I decided to redo this whole thing all over again. And this time I used the same scarlet red fabric with a cherry tone tool on top of it. And it switched the overall shades to cherry red, and then instead of that yellow mustard, I did a pink slice. And then I also restitched it with a golden thread over the pink thread so that the stitches will look more shiny. And then I stitched the back crop top pieces, and then I stitched these pieces together and hemmed their edges. Now see the difference? I mean, my camera isn't very good at capturing this specific shade, but in real life the reds are very different.
Смотря какой fabric, смотря откуда приходит fabric.
And also I finished hemming their edges with golden thread. And off camera I stitched the snap closures. And the crop top was almost finished in here, but I still wanted to bedazzle them with mini caviar beads, so I glued them as well. And in here my camera battery died again, and I also decided to stitch these red beads at the bottom edge of it. And this is how it looked. And I was thinking of bedazzling the pink slice with these red beads, but then I thought that it will be too much at this point, so I didn't do that.
Смотря сколько details.
We will still go back to this crop top, but for now let's make her skirt. Now Musa's Enchantix skirt is my all-time absolute favorite clothing item from all the accessories that the Winx fairies had. It has this really like cutesy petal-shaped slices in it, and I have been thinking how am I going to make them, and after experimenting with paper and some random fabric I came up with this diamond shape. I will show you in a minute, but I traced all these diamonds on fabric and then I cut them out. Off camera I fray checked their edges, and then I added the tool layer on top of it, and by the way this time I only did one layer of fabric with a tool on top of it because we are going to fold this, and with 2 layers it would be way too thick. And also this time I used my sewing machine off camera to stitch their edges, and then I did a regular stitch over those stitches with a golden thread. And this is how they looked. And then I took my time to bedazzle them with holographic yellow rhinestones and half-sliced spherical beads.
Spectacular, never the same, totally unique, completely not ever been done before.
And here are all these babes ready and bedazzled, and I only needed 12 of them.
И это все on design.
And now okay, how we are going to turn this into these petal slices? Now I'm going to fold it from the middle, and then I'm going to flip the pointy part and hold the edges with my fingers. And like, see how cool this is? And now I'm going to do the same thing with the rest of them. And basically I'm going to stitch them in place so that they won't unfold again. And I collected them with the threads to check how it will look at the end. And just take a look here, in between these petal shapes, it was hollow, and in the reference photos, it has like this cherry pink slices that divide them. So I cut out a shrub out of this fabric and I divided them into rectangles. And then I added a layer of tulle on top of it and I stitched them in between the petals. And this is how it looked. My camera isn't very good at capturing the right shade, so it still feels like red, but trust me, it's cherry pink. All I needed here is to do a basting stitch at the top edge and gather the skirt, and I also did a basting stitch through these edge points. And then I stretched this thread and gathered the darts. Then she had this pink ruffly fabric at the top of her skirt, so I cut out a slice of pink fabric, attached tulle on top of it and stitched it with my sewing machine. And then I hand stitched over this with a golden thread. And then I marked the distance and stitched these pleats. To fast forward, I attached those pleats to the skirt and then I added a yellow tie over it and then I bedazzled them with these rhinestones. And then I thought that it's not enough, so I also stitched these pipe-shaped beads in between the crystals. And then I thought that it's not enough yet, so I also stitched these pink iridescent beads in between the pleats. And then I thought that it's not enough yet still, so I also glued these golden beads over the top of the golden stitch of the pleats. Also, I forgot to record the process of gluing these iridescent beads in between the crystals and pipe-shaped beads. I hope that you can see those ghostly ones. Then off camera I stitched these snap closures and then I cut the allowance and burned that edge. Then I put the crop top and the skirt on this body and this is how it looked. And it looked as I wanted, but we were not done yet. See here in this reference photos, Musa has this like weird looking scarves hanging from her crop top and skirt. Like when Musa transforms, you can see those petally shapes forming before creating her skirt. So I drew and cut out patterns for that and then I traced them on fabric and glued tulle over it and I fray checked its edges. And then I used some of this bougie fabric paint from Belgium to give it some gradient. Then I took my time to hand stitch their edges and I also restitched them with a golden stitch as always. And of course they couldn't stay so plain, so I bedazzled them with golden beads. And by the way, I used beads with different shades of gold in between. If you take a closer look you can spot that, I think. And then I also added some pearls into this mix to tone down the yellow a bit. And then I tested these pieces on her crop top and skirt to see how I'm going to stitch them, and then I stitched them in place. I also made this tiny flower pendant and I glued that at the top of that golden cloth. And then the skirt was finally done. And then I stitched these ones to her crop top and I also made the yellow strap, which consisted of 2 different shades of ties twisted together. Then it was finally time for her wings, and just like with Layla, I will be using this template from Astral Blue. I printed this out on thick paper and then I cut it out. Then I separated the top wing into upper and lower pieces, and I also cut out their inner parts. So all these pieces I will be making separately from each other using wire. So I rolled the wire over these pieces to get the shapes and then I cut them out. These are all the wire pieces that I made and now I have to glue them together. I placed them with a paper wing template to tape them in place and I glued and fixed them in place with a fixation spray. And once the glue dried, I removed the template. And here are all these pieces. By the way, sorry that the background is green. I think my sister stole my pink foam background that I had. But anyways, here are all these pieces and it was finally time for me to cut out Angelina film. Now, in this template version, the wings are yellow. However, in more old school drawings of Musa and also in her 2D Winx Enchantix transformation, the edges of her wings are purple and the inner parts are yellow instead. And I'm not the biggest fan of the existence of yellow in Musa's color scheme, so I decided to do the old school version of her wings to minimize the presence of yellow. And oh my god, I was so close to running out of Angelina film. I literally like squeezed all these pieces here and cut them out. Thank god it was enough. So I cut out all these pieces and I'm using this shade called Sugar Plum. And for the yellow parts, this Lemon Gold shade. And again, I taped this template on my cutting board and then I taped one layer of Angelina film and then I took the wing wire and I glued that over the Angelina film. Then in the end, I glued the second and final layer of Angelina film on top of it. And then I repeated the same steps for the rest of these pieces. Then as I was done with that process, it was time to iron them down. And as always, I ironed these pieces using a cotton fabric over it so that the wings won't get burned in this process. And as I said before, it basically fuses the wire and the film layers together and keeps them attached to each other. Also, I'm seriously annoyed by this cheetah print ironing board case. I really need to ask my mom to come and take this away because this is just way too glamorous for a peasant like me. I'm not able to embrace this. Anytime I pass next to this, my brain is like, Babuля, это я, Анастасия.
Babuля, это я, Анастасия.
Yeah, but anyways, here I'm just showcasing you how the wings look on different background. So they basically look more purple in darker background and slightly more orangey on lighter background. So if you are going to display Musa in your collection, use a darker background for more of a shiny effect. And here are all these pieces ironed and ready for the next step. And the next step is me cutting the allowance to make it even, a bit narrow and neat looking so that I can burn these pieces and permanently lock the wire in place. And thanks to that one person again for commenting and recommending me to use thin birthday candles for this. And for the areas that I couldn't burn with a candle, I took my razor blade and I heated it with the candle and then I pushed it over the film edges and they melted in place this way. And all I needed now is to glue these pieces together, but in here I'm just showing you which pieces go with which one. I will be doing the gluing off camera so that I won't mess things up because I can't be spontaneous with this.
My name is Spontaneous, I'm 19, I'm from Montgomery, Alabama.
And here are all these pieces beautifully glued together. And of course this is just way too plain for me, so let's bedazzle these babes, love.
The thing is, I was in her dressing room and I was like, there was only a little curtain separating us while she's having her makeup done, and I started like going, I don't think I can do this, I don't think I can do this.
So I began bedazzling the Paris Hilton out of these wings. I used tacky glue and these rhinestones. And Jesus, they were bougie. I literally embarrassed myself at that store, you guys. I had to take some cash to pay for this. Like, that's how expensive these were.
Очень-очень affordable.
So I glued this to the edges, and as you can notice, I also glued mini caviar beads in between them. I basically add a drop of tacky glue at these spots, and then I add the beads on. And then as I was done bedazzling the edges, I began gluing these holographic yellow crystals to the inner yellow parts of the wings. And then as always, in between those crystals, I glued the mini beads once again. Now with a more modern variation of Musa's wings, she has these little florals on her wings, and to be honest I didn't like them, so I did the old school version instead, which is these purple crystals, so I glued them as well. And then in between them I glued these transparent rhinestones. Also, one thing that I wanted to tell you, basically I lost this metallic part of this picker and I spent hours searching for this in my room. I even went to buy one at our local stores and the seller sold me this crop, which you can't pick anything with this. And I knew that, like, there is no way in a million years I will ever be able to pick anything with it, but I still bought it because I was hungry and I couldn't resist. So when I accepted that I lost it forever, I decided to make one myself. Basically, I used matches and I placed the match inside the pen strap, and I also added some of that pink gel inside it. And I was watching a random video on YouTube and I was playing with this in my hand, And you guys, look what happened.
How many people were scared? Me too. I was really scared.
Honestly, the way I wanted to throw myself off the window, like I have no idea where my mind is.
Go little omelet, spinning like a DJ, like it's your birthday, like you got your biggest fan gonna serve you.
But anyways, I stitched these beads that you can see in the reference photos and the wings were finally done. Now it is time for Musa's Fairydust. Now I believe that it was designed to look like one of these very pretty Chinese lanterns. I mean, I'm not even speculating, it's pretty obvious. But to make the Fairydust, I took these two pins and then I heated one of their needly parts and then I stick that to the bowl. Then I took this paper punch tool and I cut out 2 circles. And I mean, if I was making cheese, this would be perfect, but yeah, no.
Go little omelet, spinning like a DJ.
But then I realized that these are way too big for this scale, so I made it a bit smaller. Oh, and I also added this bead to create the bottleneck. Then I wasted 3 layers of Mr. Super Clear on this tiny thing so that the paint will have surface to hold on to, and I painted it with acrylic paint. I did multiple layers and I sealed everything in place. Then to make the arcs, I took some of this blue wire and I shaped it over one of my brushes and then I cut them out. And oh my god, my fingers didn't fit for this scale, but I basically glued these arcs over the bottle and this is how it looked with 4 arcs and I still had to glue the rest. So I finished gluing this and this is how it looked. Then to imitate these tiny flowers sitting over the arcs, I glued these mini beads over them. And geez, I actually made a mess here. Then to make it a bit more fancy, I also glued these nail art pendant rings over these circles. And once everything was glued on, I repainted this to hide all the glued spots. And then I also painted these blue straps over it. And off camera I also painted this with a layer of glossy varnish. And the Fairydust was also finished. Now let's go back to her hairstyle again. I fixed her hair and I also tied her pigtails off camera. And the hairstyle was sort of finished in this stage, however I decided to add some extensions to her pigtails. So I did this purple twists and I also passed some beads into them. I used purple and red beads. So I wet the tip of that twist and then I passed a bit into. And then I made sure that they are all placed from an equal distance from each other. And if you might be saying, well, what if they move or fall? Like, no worries, you just add some tacky glue to their right and left sides and they will stay in place. So I did that and then I stitched them on. Then I made her hair ties and I also glued beads to them. Then I placed them on her pigtails and glued them in place. And to fast forward, I made this shape and I glued needles to them so that I can pin it over her head. And then at first I glued these beads on, however I didn't really like them, so I replaced this, which you will see how it ended up looking at the end. Then in the end I painted these gloves, I did layers of MSC to protect it, as always, and then I added the Pearl Lace powders on top of it. I mean, the gloves ended up looking slightly darker, but I really loved this shade, so I went with it. Then I did the fairy sandals. I rolled her feet with these red ties, glued them in place, and then I decorated it with crystals. And then I dressed her up, added glossy varnish to her eyes and lips, and I also pierced her belly button, and the doll was finally done. Thank you so much for watching, guys, and special thanks to all the people that made it from start to end. I'm beyond grateful and thankful for your support this far, and if you might be new here, hi and welcome. I'm super glad to have you here. If you feel like sticking around, then stick around. Also, the exciting news, Musa is currently available on eBay for 5 days of auction. If you would like to adopt this beautiful fairy, the link is under this video description. Also, once you bid for this doll and won the auction on eBay, and this is important, before clicking the purchase button, please DM me on Instagram from your real account so that I will know who am I selling this doll to. And also, in case if you bid and don't win the auction, DM me to commission another Musa doll. I will be available to make another one and I will be done for good. And in the end, as always, I would like to thank my amazing Patreons. Smookish, Kurtula Siegel, Awkward Burp, Purple Pixie, Flying Bachelors, Angela Reed, SK, Anna Drazdova, Linda K, Stephanie Good, Robin Vanderbush, Josephine Falk, Maria, Maureen A, Jennifer Moreno, and Dori Dorime. And one last time, thank you so much for watching, and now enjoy the end result pictures, and I will see you again when the nature starts blooming.
Я вам желаю хороший spring and summer.
Okay, bye guys.